All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Board of Adjustment meeting. Tonight is January 15th. We have several things on our agenda. First is the approval of the minutes from December 10. And if I'm not mistaken, that was just to approve the relevant criterion standard. It was a very short meeting. I've reviewed the minutes and it looks exactly like it happened. So do we have anybody who wants to move to
I have an amendment.
Okay.
There is a typo in the list of people absent. My name is spelled with an S-E-N and not an S-O-N.
We will make that anything other than the misspelling. And Ann will correct that. Okay, I'm ready for a motion if anybody wants to make one.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes, approve the meeting for the criteria that we held.
Relevant criteria.
Yeah, for the relevant criteria that we held.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Oh, I can't second it, I wasn't there.
I'll second that.
I was going to say, I was looking at Ann. Or I'm sorry, I was looking at, yeah. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I wasn't there either, so.
I think so. Probably 2 abstentions. And if that's the case, we'll go ahead and approve those with the spelling correction of Lorraine's name.
We have a quorum. Do you need a quorum to do that? I don't-
We should be okay with,
Yeah, okay.
we should be okay because everybody who was there voted aye.
Oh,
Let's go ahead and we'll move forward. The second item on the agenda this evening is election of officers. What I'd like to do is just push that to the end. We've got a number of people here with us for the real reason that we're here tonight, which is a public hearing for a proposed conditional use permit. And we'll go ahead and take that up. That's item number 3 on the agenda. And Lee, if you want to take over, we'll turn it over to staff for the presentation.
Good evening. So tonight for your review, we have a conditional use permit application for a property located at 421 South Jackson Street. The proposal is, the applicant, New St. Andrews, is requesting a conditional use permit to convert an existing parking lot into a dedicated student and employee parking lot located at 421 South Jackson Street. And colleges are listed as a conditional use within the Central Business Zoning District, so that is why they have applied for a conditional use permit tonight. So just for some background and context here, going back to 2008, the Board of Adjustment approved a conditional use permit for NSA to be located at 405 South Main Street. And that was approved with one condition, and the condition was that they had to dedicate 42 parking spaces to NSA employees and students anywhere or somewhere within the city. And then following that, in 2013, the Board of Adjustment approved another CUP to satisfy the first condition of the conditional use permit. And that was for a parking lot located at 505 South Jackson Street. And that was for a parking lot, again, to be dedicated only for NSA student and employee parking. Now, fast forward to July 2017, the Board of Adjustment again approved a conditional use permit for educational institution belonging to NSA located at 112 North Main Street. There were 2 conditions attached to this CUP. The first one was that the applicant must provide 47 off-street parking spaces within a quarter mile of the subject property. And the second condition was that the applicant is allowed to phase in the off-street parking requirement by providing 50% of the required parking mitigation upon occupancy of the building. And so this here just shows where the location of the subject property is, just right off of Jackson Street. And this is an alleyway here. It's located within the Central Business Zoning District, like I mentioned before. And so just to go over condition number 1, so the applicant, again, must provide 47 off-street parking spaces within a quarter mile of the subject property. And this here shows that the proposed college here at 112 North Main Street is 0.21 miles away from the subject property at 421 South Jackson Street. So it does meet the first condition. And the second condition, again, was that the applicant is allowed to phase in the off-street parking requirement by providing 50% of the required parking mitigation upon occupancy of the building. And so the plans that were submitted to us show this parking lot here with 25 spaces. Of that, 10 are standard parking spaces, 14 compact, 1 ADA accessible parking space. So it does meet that condition as well. Just some more information about the site and the land use. The subject property is 7,500 square feet, and it's currently used as an unregulated parking lot with no structures. The lot is partially paved, aside from a gravel surface in the center where a building was previously located. So access would only be from the alleyway between Jackson and Almond Street. There would be no access at all from Jackson Street. And that's what it shows today here. This is a view from Jackson Street. As you can see, there's no access in currently. And the view from the alleyway, this is how it would be accessed. And so staff recommends approval of the CUP for the proposed dedicated parking lot located at 421 South Jackson Street with 2 conditions. The first one is that the applicant shall bring the subject property into compliance with City of Moscow parking lot standards, which include paving, curbing, striping, and landscaping. And number 2, signage shall be posted stating that the lot is reserved for NSA parking only. And board shall direct staff to prepare relevant criteria and standards to be reviewed upon an upcoming meeting. I can take any questions you might have. Here are the relevant criteria and standards.
My understanding is NSA owns this parking lot already, is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
I'm getting a nod.
Yes.
That was what I gathered, that's what I gathered for the application, and so they are just seeking to use this they're seeking to use their own property to satisfy the off-site parking that was required of them a couple of years ago.
That's correct. Yes.
I have a couple of questions. One is, the condition number 2 for signage, it should state that it's reserved for NSA between the hours of 8 and 5.
So if
Or
it's...
whatever the hours are that they're going to be using
Sure.
it. So it's clear to the public that they can use it at other times.
Sure.
What?
Yeah, would you?
There's no requirement that it be up to the public, so
I think it's private property.
it'd be up to them whether or not they open it up to the public after hours or not, so.
Okay, who currently is using this lot?
It's currently an unregulated lot, so I believe it's open to the public. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would be the domino effect of removing this removing this unregulated parking from downtown, since it's not going to be available during the business day any longer?
Well, people would have to find parking elsewhere, so probably more street parking. However, when I was there the other day during business hours, it didn't seem like it was being used by a significant amount of people. So it probably wouldn't be that significant, but that's my personal take.
Okay, my last question is, I'd just like to find out what kind of efforts NSA is making to provide for those other 50% of the parking of the 23 spaces, since obviously this lot is not going to be big enough to provide the full load.
Sure. And
And that's not before you tonight.
I understand.
So, I mean, we couldn't speculate on that. You could certainly ask the applicant about that, but.
Thank you.
yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, this is the first phase, which allows them occupancy of the building. This is the condition they needed, right?
Correct.
So the second phase is for the remaining parking. Is there a stipulation or so when they need to be able to provide that? Or is that open-end? Or I don't know what triggers the second phase requirement for parking.
I believe it has to do with how many students are enrolled in the school, if I'm
Yeah,
Is that
and
correct?
5 years,
Yeah.
whichever
And-
comes
okay.
first.
Oh, okay, so they have 5 years or so many students before they have to find another parking place.
Yeah, I believe it was 150 students or 5 years, whichever comes first.
I just didn't know if there was, what the next step was, I guess, after
Sure.
this, where they obviously are allowed occupancy, but their requirement was for 42 total, and so I just didn't know when the other half were going to be required. I get it now.
right, yeah.
and as again, one of my questions relating to private property, is there anything that the city is aware of that requires them to have this open to the public?
No, this is the short answer, because we used to have a section in our code which did require that after hours, they did open it up to the public, but that's since disappeared, so now there's not that requirement
So
anymore.
as it sits right now, being private property, if they wanted to just block it off and not have anybody use it and just have a flat piece of ground, that would be up to them and they could do that, is that correct?
Yeah, because it's their private property, they could do that.
Not that they would do that,
Yeah.
but that's certainly an option. That's
Sure.
something within their purview of their land.
Correct, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What we are going to do now is, we'll invite the applicant to come forward. If he would desire, you can state your name and address, and then following the applicant, we will invite those who want to speak in favor of the conditional use permit to come forward, and after that, we'll invite any other person who wants to come forward and provide whatever input they want to provide. So we'll turn the time over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us here. So my name is Ben Merkel. I live at 528 East First Street here in Moscow. I'm the president of New St. Andrews College and have been president there for about 4 years. There's not a whole lot that I have to say because I feel like most of what we're asking for is pretty straightforward and you already all know the story fairly well. Just to interact with some of the questions earlier, yes, NSA does own that property already. There are basically 3 parcels in a row that we own, and I honestly cannot give the explanation for why 2 of them already have a CUP and the third did not get. I kind of wish they would have just gotten the CUP for that third part when they did the first 2, but that was before I became president. That is something that we have just been. It's been an unregulated lot, as was mentioned. It's just open. We do own the property. We could sell it and develop it, but we've wanted to use it for parking. Regarding the question about what would happen outside of the 8 to 5 range, while the city does not require anything of us, our current 2 lots that we do have a CUP on, you'll notice that it's signed that it's NSA parking for 8 to 5, and then it opens up in the evening as well as through the weekend. So for instance, Farmers Market takes all of that area, and I would say that's most definitely our intention to continue that tradition of making it open to the city. As far as the trickle-down impact of us putting a CUP on that, I don't think we would see much, but when we were granted the CUP for the property formerly known as Cadillac Jacks, when we received the CUP for that, the city said we want a parking lot within 1/4 mile of that building, and so that's what we're bringing to you, is a parking lot within 1/4 mile of that building. So I feel like the trickle-down effect is what the city asked us to do. Our intention is really to do what you've asked us to do, and I think we're bringing to you a proposal that does exactly what we were asked to do on the last CUP. I don't think there's too much more that I have in terms of prepared remarks. Like I said, I feel like you all know the situation fairly well, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, things that I could fill in the blanks on.
And then my understanding is you're planning on developing it to city standards.
Yes.
As soon as practical?
Yes.
Okay, within the timelines that'll be outlined
Right.
by the city? Okay.
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do you know who's using it now? There are cars parked there. Do you know if there's NRS students or?
If I had to guess, this is just a fairly educated guess, the bulk of it would be probably either folks shopping downtown or I think a lot of it would probably be employees from MC tend to park there quite a lot. I would also note that if you look in the picture there, you saw an alley. Directly on the other side of the alley is a commercial parking lot that is there for anybody if they want to pay for parking. I think if you did a study on it, you would notice it's almost always empty. It's not, if you are concerned about parking and you're ready to pay for your parking, it's right there. There's not a parking shortage as far as that goes. There are plenty of options.
directly north of that paid parking area, there's another parking lot there as well, I believe. And I'm just curious, if you know who owns that piece of
I
property?
think MC, but there's somebody far more qualified to answer that question here who will probably speak in a moment. He can tell you about some of the other things that are happening. We have taken some time to speak to the folks all around that about the impact of us putting a CUP on that property, and we had pretty positive reception from everybody there. And I think you'll hear from a number of people who own the properties all around describing how the impact isn't something that they're concerned about.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll go ahead and invite anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this conditional use permit to come forward, and if you'll state your name and address for the record, we'll be happy to hear what you have to say.
Let's see, Garrett Thompson, and we're going to go with the address of 212 College Avenue, which will tie you back to Crate Seed, which is, that's the hat I'm wearing today as I'm here at the lectern. We got notice of this, and we just want to be on the record that Crate's Seed fully supports this application. And yeah, other than that, we would ask you to approve it.
Thank you very much.
I'm Andrew Krabschetz. I live out on Lenville Road, and I am the CEO of MC. And yes, we use some of the parking in that parking lot, but I'm also a huge fan of people being able to do what they want with their stuff. And it's pretty not, it's not too extravagant to want to park in your parking spots. So I'm a huge fan of that. So as a large employer downtown who uses a bunch of parking, and we buy parking on the Jackson Street parking lot and have our own parking lots, we are in support of NSA getting to use their own property for parking. So, any questions?
One of the concerns that I expect is going to come up, and it has come up already, is how is the parking situation near your building?
Yeah. Again, there's a parking lot that is you can pay to park in, and it's empty all the time. And MZ employees park as far away as my silo property, and there's plenty of parking there. We figure out a way. In one sense, tight parking is a sign of prosperity, and that's a good thing because prosperity usually means more restaurants, and I'm a big fan of eating. So, as you can probably tell. Yes.
If you know the answer to this, who is the owner of the pay parking lot we're talking about?
It's the same people that own Gambino's.
Thanks.
Yep. Other questions? You can ask me anything. How often I shave my head? Anything. Okay, thank you.
My name is Mike Church. I live at 1041 Lion Road, which is in the county, excuse me, but I own the property immediately to the south of NSA's parking lot, the paved one. And my business, Kester Realty Group, is located at 521 South Jackson, just down the street. And would just say that I'm fully in support of approving it. I see no reason to deny the application, and I park right downtown, right in front of my building all the time, and never had a problem at all. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Scott Underwood, and I live at 426 Quail Run. I'm the pastor of Candy Creek Church. We are directly to the north at 417 South Jackson, and we see this lot as our primary parking opportunity for our church, and it's a growing church. And New St. Andrews has been a good friend to us. They provide some permits for us to park on some of the CUP lots. And in addition to that, we have a good relationship with them, and we do use that lot extensively on Sundays. And we feel like as it comes up to the city standards as well, just having it paved will help us with some drainage issues. And so we're fully in support of the CUP. Any questions?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Rusty Opes, 931 Harold Street. There's two parcels directly to the west of this property in question. I own both of those. They're small rentals. I own a 12-plex and a triplex directly west of that as well. I'm strongly in support of this, and I don't see a parking problem at all. I'm like Andrew. I look forward to having to park more than a couple hundred feet away from my office downtown. Questions for me? Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff Breed. I live at 1007 Catnock Lane, and I'm a board member for Canyon Creek Church, which is the building just to the north of the lot as well. And reiterate what Scott had said earlier about the benefits we see with the relationship with NSA and their willingness to let us use their lot. And especially want to emphasize that with it being paved, I think it'll be great because we do have drainage issues right now. With it actually drains into our building if we get a really bad rain, so into the basement. So I'm sure this is going to help us. So for all those reasons and others, I am in favor. So any questions for me?
Thank you very much. Okay, we will open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak. We'll hear what you have to say.
I'm Ian Von Linder, and I'm the owner of 121 South Jackson. I've operated a business there since 1986. 1984, we resisted the seduction of the University of Idaho incubator. We later resisted Alturas Business Park, and we purposely expanded our engineering business into the downtown. We remodeled 2 buildings. We've won awards for the restoration of those buildings. For 30 years, we provided professional jobs for more than 40 city and county residents. We sponsored more than 24 University of Idaho internships. We put $3 to $4 million in annual payrolls on the Moscow streets, and we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to this city in taxes. Those 2 buildings now provide 9 jobs. Majority are nonprofit organizations. The rents are about half to 2/3 of what they were. And the taxes have gone up. And that change is overwhelmingly due to the effect of the city's policies, changes on the private parking market. To make our buildings viable, we need to secure long-term private parking leases for our tenants and businesses. The 2 biggies that killed us were the county moving into the new license bureau and the educational institutions that are parking their students downtown. We previously leased as many as 18 spaces from private property owners to make our business viable. Those are no longer available. If you find them, you keep it as a closely guarded secret, and you pay about 3 times what we used to. We downtowners spent 75 years keeping the U of I students from parking downtown. And now, in some wrong-headed logic, the city has directed an educational institution to swallow up every remaining private parking spot within a 1/4 of a mile of our buildings. Our buildings will never be able to generate the kinds of income that we could before. Yet our taxes go up because the city is dedicating key parts of the downtown to tax-exempt government and educational institutions, and expecting we taxpayers to pick up their tax tab. I urge you to please deny this variance and to urge the city to undertake its first parking study since 1993 to facilitate the tax-paying entities downtown. I love having these young students downtown. I love the vibrancy they bring to the downtown, but we don't want their cars downtown. All educational institutions should develop parking for their students outside of the business core. I also respectfully request that, given the short notice on this meeting and the 3 minutes we're allowed to offer testimony, that you leave the record open for at least 10 business days so that we can consider these comments and submit written comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard. I don't see how you can approve this because what you have before you is not what New St. Andrews has requested. So I will read. You say New St. Andrews is now requesting a CUP, and I hope you clarify CUP and variance, I've heard both, to utilize an existing parking lot at 421 South Jackson to satisfy the off-street parking requirements of their location at 112 North Main Street. In their written request, Exhibit A in your packet, it says NSA requests parking dedicated to generally support the education services of NSA. NSA has 2 locations in the Central Business District with off-street parking requirements, and the proposed change in use is intended to meet a portion of that off-street parking requirement. In other words, they're generalizing. They're not saying this parking is for our music conservatory at North Main. They're saying we have 2 institutions, and this is for use for both of them. I think that is a big discrepancy, and I don't see how it even got on the record. Also, in their request, they say to satisfy the number 7, that the proposed use will not be in conflict with the comprehensive plan. They say that when they applied for the CUP for North Main, it was recognized as being in concert with the comp plan, and by extension, the use of this project is in support, would also be in concert with the comp plan. First of all, there was a big discussion, which is still going on in the City Council, about having educational institutions downtown and how it fits with the comp plan. As has just been brought out, there's a lot of question about whether it does fit with the comp plan. And in fact, there was an appeal to the decision of your board that made in May. The appeal went to City Council. One of the appeals discussed the fact that it wasn't in concert with the comprehensive plan. City Council remanded it back to your board to discuss both the parking situation and number 7, the proposed use being in concert with the comp plan. You never discussed number 7. It was totally not on the table. You only talked about parking. And so it still stands an open question as far as I'm concerned. There is a big problem about parking downtown, and the auditorium has not been discussed here, but your own Public Works Department talked about the proposed development and said, that's the North Main development, the proposed development will add competition with the patrons of other businesses and downtown residents for the available public parking spaces near the building. So you're increasing the competition for downtown, and I do appeal to you to not pass this because it does not match the request. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tina Hilding, and I live at 411 North Howard Street. And I would also like to address my concerns specifically about the meeting of criteria number 4 and number 7, the relevant criteria and standards. And there are, I believe, a number of issues with this proposal. This is the third conditional use permit for educational use for this. This is the third conditional use permit that's gone through on this project or on this work. And one of the things that number 7 looks at is the cumulative impact on the central business district. And I think that concern remains. And I would add that as part of the last CUP, the BOA was supposed to reconsider criteria number 7, which they did not. And that was appealed, and that appeal was not heard. In addition, there were significant errors with the parking study that was done by the city, and I have information about the significant errors in their data collection, their analysis of the data in their parking study, and I can submit that. My concern is parking remains a great concern in the central business district, and the cumulative impact of adding a third CUP for that area. This appears to be a shell game, using existing parking to meet the CUP requirements, but where are those people going to park? And they may be saying they get to walk a little farther, but I can tell you that when I go get a cup of coffee and can't find any parking, we drive by and we don't stop for the coffee. And that impacts the businesses downtown. Okay, let's see. Oh, the other thing at the council meeting, when it was remanded back to the Board of Adjustment, the criteria 7 was mentioned 8 times, and it was supposed to come back to the council, to the Board of Adjustment. Oh, and I would also add about the survey currently being done regarding whether educational institutions should be allowed in the central business district. There's a survey right now being done, as I understand it, in the city, and I think this variance should be put on hold, at least, until there's a discussion about how educational institutions fit into our downtown. Also, another item I would say is there was a limit of 200 students for the NSA at the one site and 300 more at the CJ site, and the question that I have is how will that be monitored in the parking? And so I think that's it. And my concern remains about the cumulative impact on the central business district. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
David Hall, 1334 Wallen Road, Moscow. Not a big deal, but you need to have somebody proof check your criteria number 7 there. I think I brought it up before, but that's not the reason I came up. On the surface, it seems it's no big deal to change the use of property from a parking lot to a parking lot. But I think the reason that this is before you is to try to show that New St. Andrews is following the directives of finding parking spots for potential students to the Cadillac Jacks property, which the Board of Adjustments asked them to do. And it looks like they're trying to do that, but in a way that really kind of backfires and doesn't follow the intent of what the Board of Adjustment was to help solve parking problems. And in fact, it seems to do the opposite. It being reserved for New St. Andrews students, it just displaces the existing parking there and seems like it makes it worse downtown and doesn't really do what the Board of Adjustment was hoping. So maybe the Board of Adjustment needs to think about how they direct people in the future about how to solve parking issues. So for this specific CUP, I'm not either for or against it, but it doesn't seem like it's addressing the root reason for why they're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anybody else who'd like to come forward and provide input? We'd be happy to listen to what you have to say. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead then and close the public hearing portion of this meeting, and we will.
Can I phrase my comment as a question and get an answer?
Well, let's hear what you have to say. We'll have you come back up before we close, we'll have you come back up and.
Thank you. Okay. My question is, since New St. Andrews did not ask to have this lot reserved for students of the North Main Music Conservatory, how can you grant that it would satisfy that requirement?
So I will defer to the city staff to see if, I don't know if that's a.
That's been our understanding, that they are requesting this parking lot for the property at 112 North Main Street. So that's been our understanding, and that's how all the documentation, the staff report, the quarter-mile distance, all those calculations were included as part of that. And so we've noticed it as such, and so we don't have any issue on our end as far as.
Okay, so from the city's perspective, then, what needed to be done to bring it before us tonight has been done, is that correct?
That's been our understanding from the beginning. This is for the 112 North Main location. They've already satisfied and received a conditional use permit for the parking lot to the south of this subject property previously in 20, I think it was 2013. For that. And so, as far as we know, they've already satisfied the parking for the Friendship Square location. And so this is just to obtain occupancy for the North Main location.
Okay.
It's an understanding, but it's not in writing. That looks to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Lorraine, you had a.
Yeah, just a follow-on question. Has anyone discussed whether it might be put a little bit more muscle into that understanding by requiring perhaps a sticker system? So, because I'm just thinking, if it were a cold rainy day and I were going to go to class at Friendship Square and there were this enticing parking lot really much closer to my classrooms, why wouldn't a student who is not in the conservatory but is in the Friendship Square facility bogart up all the spaces at this new proposed space? I'd like to see something to make it clear that this is dedicated for the conservatory students.
Is that a question for me?
Well, yeah, it's a question of, have you considered doing something like that? And maybe adding that to the conditions.
Well, personally, I don't know how we would enforce that. I mean, we don't control really private parking lots, and we don't have enough staff to go around and monitor who's parking at which location. I think originally the applicant didn't want to open up the conditional use permit for their Friendship Square location, so they received another conditional use permit for the North Main location. And so right now we have, 200 students that could be potentially at the Friendship Square and 300 for the North Main location. And so each of them has a parking requirement. It's the same college, but they have maximum enrollments for those two dual locations. And so, the possibility of dedicating that parking on the 505 lot, which is directly to the south of this, they've already done. This lot's directly to the north of that. They're pretty much the same parking lot anyway for the two locations. So, I guess the short answer is no, we wouldn't regulate as far as who's parking in which parking lot.
Just wanted to clarify, if I may, not that I'm expecting that the city should take on the regulation of private property and private parking lots, but that in order for these lots to be used in an orderly fashion that carries forth the intent of the earlier conditional use permit, maybe requiring or asking that NSA put in place a system so that the spaces at this new lot be allocated to conservatory students and the spaces at the lot by closer to 6th Street be allocated to the Friendship Square students.
That's what they're proposing. Yeah, that's the proposal, is that this lot be dedicated to the conservatory students.
No, it's not in there.
It's not in there.
It's not in their proposal.
Speak to that?
Please.
Please.
Go ahead and state your name one more time for the record.
Ben Merkel at 528 East First. I think just in the interest of, our goal would be to minimize parking impact on downtown, and to make that kind of distinction strikes me as actually making things quite a bit worse. I'm imagining if a student had a class in one building in the morning and maybe another class later on in the other building, would they need to go out to the parking lot and move their car 20 feet over so that now they're in the lot that corresponds with that building? If I'm a University of Idaho student and I have a parking permit to the University of Idaho, that accesses a much, much, much larger campus than anything that we're talking about. You've got one parking system to match a large university, and I just think you would be imposing a really, really impractical requirement on the school that would probably exacerbate things rather than actually reduce the impact on the parking downtown. Does that make sense, or maybe I'm missing what you're asking?
Yeah, President Merkel, I think, I just appreciate the clarification that the people who are enrolling in the conservatory will not only be taking their classes in the CJ's facility, but will also be taking classes at the Friendship Square facility.
Yes, they could be in both buildings, and so we wanted to increase the parking lot capacity to increase the added students that the city has granted in adding 300 students. But that kind of distinction just seems like it would be really impractical.
Okay, well, I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree. In that case, I agree with that. I just, for some reason, by my reading of this, it looked like
yes.
You were allocating I graduated also from an institution that had a college and a music conservatory, and
Right.
there was enough separation.
Yes, yeah, so there would be college, regular college classes at the CJ's location
Okay.
as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and, if we haven't closed it yet, we're happy to, if you've got another comment that you'd like us to listen to, we're happy to listen to that.
I understood that the original CUP was for 300 students at North Main, not adding more students to the Friendship Square facility, which was limited to 200 students. So now we have 500 students, and we don't have, and the parking lot request is not for North Main. I just want to emphasize that. So if you pass it and say it's for North Main because you understand it is not. And now we are merging students from both places, which was not the intent of the original CUP, either of the CUP in 2005 or 2017.
Thank you very much. Please. Why don't you come up so we can catch on the microphone, and we'll have you state your name one more time.
Ian Von Linden, and my question is, and this is obviously confusing to everyone here, are you going to leave the record open so we can try to sort this out and submit written testimony?
Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to go ahead and close the public input portion of our meeting. Couple of points of clarification, I think, from the city before we end our deliberations. We are here for a conditional use permit. As far as I'm aware, and my understanding is that NSA has satisfied the preliminary steps needed to bring it in front of us this evening. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we have received, it's been properly noticed. We've gotten some input from different departments. Is that correct as well?
Correct.
Okay. Then let's go ahead and discuss this. I'll open it up to the board. Anybody who wants to, Lauren, you want to jump in? Go
How do
ahead.
you know that? You can tell me.
I could just tell.
Yeah, well, no, because one of the things, Chapter 2 of the comprehensive plan, and I'm actually looking at page 5 of the city's report, says that the comprehensive plan, Chapter 2, land use and community character, talks about the infill development and adaptive reuse of the areas that surround downtown. And I am, I'm aware of some of this infill development has been happening, and there's been, for example, some more affordable housing has been built in that area, kind of behind Jackson Street, sort of between Jackson Street and the University of Idaho campus. There's been what I view as infill development. It's buildings being erected, mostly for housing. I'd like to have a clarification from the city of what adaptive reuse means, but one of my big concerns, just from my study of property law, is that oftentimes parking lots exist because it's a way to hold on to a piece of property either for speculation or, it's a way to get some income off of a piece of property to justify hanging on to it until you get a better offer for something to do with it. Question one is this compatible with the desire for infill, the comprehensive plan's statement that infill development and adaptive reuse should happen in the areas that surround downtown, of which this is one. And also, and it's kind of contrary to that, a concern that this parking lot is really being held onto for the time being, but what happens if there's an opportunity to sell it off, to develop something on it? And, how many years will we be able to say will there be parking there before a more appealing use appears for that space? And we have even more vehicles being crowded into the rest of the public downtown areas.
Thank you very much. Tim, anything that you want to add?
The only comments I'm thinking of is I understand the parking issues are always emotional, and certainly a parking lot in this downtown core, now for a special use would have some consequences, but I have to assume, and I wasn't in part of the deliberations earlier, that when the decision was made to require them to find a parking lot within a quarter mile of the facility, then certainly most likely that was going to be in the core. So I have to assume that the city already took that into consideration. And as far as identifying within the user the types of students that can use it, frankly, if I were the school, I would want to be able to manage that myself. So I am sensitive to the parking thing, but I'm afraid that's been deliberated previously, and it is a parking lot. It's been used as one. They own the property, and it meets the requirements of that was already promulgated, required for the condition for this type of use.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, I'm going to make an assumption here that that they are either at the point of gaining occupancy for the CJ's building, or they have already acquired it, because this 50% of the parking was a requirement from our board to establish their occupancy. But it seems like things have been going on in that building, so I'm going to guess that they've acquired the occupancy. But I have a business downtown myself, and I know for myself that parking is a premium down there. And where I'm at, where my business is located, we have a private parking lot. And that parking lot gets terribly abused daily, and at evenings and weekends. Parking is a huge problem downtown. I don't think that the Board of Adjustment's going to be able to correct that problem in the near future. The way that the laws seem to be established here in Moscow, which I'm not really in favor of, but a business in the central business district downtown, a business downtown is not required to have any parking, no parking whatsoever, and that to me is a problem for the town, for my business included. As I say, my business has a parking lot, private parking lot, which we pay for dearly. Our square footage is based on how many parking spots we include, not only our square footage of our building. So it costs a lot of money to have a parking lot downtown, and unfortunately, we can't enforce it, saying that it's only for us. We have signs up, but it's really difficult. In this instance, we have a situation here where a business that is downtown owns the land. And I think the landowner has every right to do whatever they want with that building, with that piece of property. And if they want to dedicate this parking lot that they own for parking spots and meet the conditional use permit that was put in front of them, I think they have the right to do that. I don't see where the city or anybody else can tell them they can't use their parking lot for their own purpose. So I really don't have a problem with the proposal myself.
Thank you. Annette, anything else?
I have nothing to add. I think the way Tim explained his piece was very eloquent, and I agreed with every point as well as Steve's comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I agree with Steve. I think this is clearly private property. I don't perceive there's going to be any change of use in what's already happening there. The available testimony that we have from nearby is that there is available parking. Some may not like the fact that it's paid parking, but as I go anywhere on campus, you can't go anywhere on the U of I without paying for parking. So I'm not troubled at all that there's paid parking available. I'm troubled with the idea that we would somehow tell them they can't do what they want with their property. I'm troubled with the idea that we would somehow tell them that you can't somehow sell this or you can't somehow develop this how you want. We've heard testimony from President Merkel that the intent is to have it very similar to what's already happening over there, which means that they're going to make it available to the public. That's their intent. One of the reasons I asked the city was to be very specific to find out, is there any requirement that they open it up to the public? And the answer is no, there's not. If they wanted to board it up, if they wanted to barricade it off and just sit there and stare at an empty piece of dirt, they could absolutely do that. And that's their right. That's their right. The other testimony that I find compelling is we have the church nearby, the Canyon Creek Church. And it sounds to me that by developing this to city standards, this is actually going to improve their building. It's going to reduce a nuisance, a flooded or some sort of a flooding nuisance or a water hazard that's happening. So, again, this is a situation, I agree with Tim in the sense that we're not here to discuss what happened in the past. That's nothing that we can do anything about tonight, but there was a requirement imposed on them by the city in the past. They're here. The conditions that the city has imposed have been complied with. And I like Steve and I like Tim and Annette, don't have a problem with this particular conditional use permit. I think that the condition that the city has suggested, which is to bring the subject property into compliance with the City of Moscow parking lot standards, is appropriate. I didn't ask about signage, but I expect that the sign will be probably identical to what we've already seen out there. I think that's a reasonable assumption under the circumstance. President Merkel is indicating in the affirmative, so I think that shouldn't be a problem. So I'm in favor of this conditional use permit. So that being the case, happy to hear any other discussion, happy to entertain a motion with regard to this conditional use permit.
One thing that I find helpful is, and that was not obvious from the application at all, is that NSA is talking about the use of its own property. And, I guess, my only concern is that should NSA decide that they would rather, do something else with this property than hold it as a parking lot, that they would continue to abide by this condition by finding other appropriate parking within the within the quarter-mile radius of the school, of the
And Mike, you might be able, I expect that would be implicit in this. If somehow this property is used where the parking is no longer satisfied, I would expect that they would be
Yeah, it's an
required to
ongoing
find some-
obligation
yeah.
of the conditional use permit for the college at North Main, as well as the Friendship Square location. Over time, they've moved those parking lots around. They used to be, they leased spaces out the East Side Marketplace because the original condition of that CUP was that they find off-street parking in the central business or outside. I mean, it pretty much meant anywhere in the city. And so they've taken steps to acquire the lot to the south of this in order to provide a closer location for their students to park. So, yeah, it would be an ongoing obligation of the CUP.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Lorraine. I think that's a good point to bring up, so.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application for the conditional use permit of 421 South Jackson Street, and have the city prepare the relevant criteria and standards for the board to review at some future date that works out for everybody.
And that would include the two conditions as suggested by city?
Yes, both conditions.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? I didn't hear any. I thought that was unanimous. And it appears to be a unanimous vote. So that conditional use permit has passed. The next step, just for your information, is we will have a meeting to where we will approve the relevant criteria and standards, and generally, I expect that will probably happen within the next week. So why don't we go ahead and talk about when that might be right now, so those who want to participate can hear it here first, but, and then we'll move on to our.
Yeah, so we were looking at either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday next week.
Either of those days work for me.
Wednesday's out for me.
How about Tuesday, the 22nd?
Yeah,
Does that work?
I'll be 5 or 6 flying in from San Antonio. I should make it if the plane's on time.
5:30 on the Tuesday, the 22nd?
I'm sorry. No, I was talking about me. I can't make 5:30 on Tuesday. I could make 7, but
So
Wednesday? Wednesday is fine, but Thursday at 5:30, yes.
Yes.
Thursday,
works for me.
Thursday, the 24th of 5:30? Lorraine, does that work for you?
Can do that.
And Paul, ma'am, okay.
Oh, okay.
Thursday. So there'll be a public notice posted, but it's anticipated that we will be getting together in the building next door on Thursday, the 24th at 5:30 to approve the relevant criterion standard with regard to this conditional use permit, so. But check the notice in case that changes. Yes, sir.
So the hearing record is closed.
Yes, it is. Okay. The next order of business that we have to take up this evening relates to election of officers. We want to take that up tonight. I think we're due, if I'm not mistaken. It's been probably over a year, so.
Opportunity to elect Marshall chair.
And I did receive an email from both Joe and Marshall with their input. So,
Okay.
Joe says that he's happy to serve either position, and Marshall says Joe is a great chair, and Mark is doing a great job to assist Joe. So,
I second that.
As the newest guy here, I third that.
Great idea. I fourth
If they're
it.
willing.
Well, if Joe's willing, and it's easy to be back up to Joe, since he's usually here, so.
I've only seen him once.
Yeah, well. Any other input? Otherwise,
I think it's fine if you're willing.
sure, I'm happy to be the backup guy, so.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, I guess we got to move, we got a motion then, right? I move that,
That Joe,
I want to make sure, because I don't, I guess their names here.
so Joe
correctly.
Bozzoli
Joe Bozzoli
for chair.
for chair, and for assistant chair? It'd
Vice
be-
chair.
For vice chair, it's Mark Thompson.
There.
Very smooth.
That guy.
Lorraine seconds it.
What's your name, Tim?
Motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have duly elected. It was Lorraine. Was it Lorraine?
It
Lorraine.
was.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got next Thursday, we'll get together. Any other communications or any other business? Oh,
February 26th is the?
yes, so just a quick note. So February 26th is the date for the next
Okay.
hearing, not the 29th of January. So
That's a long time out. Is there a concern that someone could walk in the door tomorrow and have one, and or do you feel like you just need that much time?
It was a scheduling issue, I think,
Okay.
is what pushed it
Scheduling,
out,
just
and
couldn't figure-
an
fit
issue
it in any
with timing for sending out notices as well. That's why January.
a room issue,
Oh.
yeah, that happens too, so.
So, and the next hearing on February 26th, we anticipate having two different issues.
And that's at 7 also, correct?
Are they CUPs or variances?
CUPs.
Okay.
Yeah, the second one came in today, so I hadn't told you.
Okay.
We just went with the same date.
So is it true the city hasn't done a parking study since 1993?
That's not true.
That's not true.
They have.
We've done a
It's
number of
been
parking
discussed.
studies. Transportation Commission last looked at it and provided a number of recommendations in 2007 timeframe. And so that was, I think, the last time they had taken a look at it. But yeah, it's currently being discussed by City Council to possibly take a look at a downtown parking study.
Great. These coming up don't have anything to do with curb cuts, do they?
No.
Okay. Should be smooth sailing then, I would imagine, so. Oh, yeah. I thought that might come up this evening, but. didn't,
Cutting the
so.
curb in from Jackson into the park?
Yeah,
Oh.
it didn't, so, at any rate.
Oh, they said in this that they weren't.
They weren't gonna,
they
I
weren't
didn't
gonna do
figure
any
they would,
curb
but
cuts.
it seems like that is, in times past,
Parking
we've had a lot
is-
of discussions about curb cuts, so, heated discussions. You wouldn't think, but
Slows traffic, I guess.
Where are new curb, where are
I think
new
our
curb
discussion
cuts
is
being
closed. I'm
contemplated?
ready to go home. How about you?
Me too.
Yeah, I just had, I had a little bit of heartburn over all of this, simply because of their parking lot schematic here. And if you go count the parking spots out there, they're supposed to have 42 from the first go-around is what it says in our paperwork here, and they're adding 25. And so that would say that there were, I don't know, 25 and 42. There should be X amount of parking spots on this property that they own. There aren't that many parking spots.
Well, they'll have to
This is another parking lot to the north of
It's a
the one
different
they
lot.
currently own.
Yeah, that was my confusion at first when I was reading it.
Well, if you look at the property, the parking lot below it, it's got two rows, 11, another row of 6, and another row of 11. So that gives you 22, 20, actually, the 11 here actually is part of this project here. But, yeah, there aren't that many parking spots.
Steve, they're gonna have, when they pave it, they'll have to stripe it,
Mhm.
and we'll all be able to count it, and we know what
Well-
what they say they're gonna put in there, so, and I'm sure a slot has to be minimum width, so
Well,
I
they can
gotta
get, they can
believe.
get to 25. They can get 25 that
Yeah.
they're proposing on the property they've got, but they're taking 11 spots off of the 42 that they already had claimed for their original SU.
No, there's 30 on that southerly lot. They have the other 12 at another location within the city. So this is,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is an addition.
And that's
to-
what my thought was, is that.
It's
they have
somewhere
another-
Right, because
It's not
they're
on that
leasing,
lot.
is it MZ who's leasing spaces in the Jackson Street lot, not New St. Andrews, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm guessing that they have lots, other lot, and they have parking spots other than what's on on these lots.
Correct.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, correct.
Gotta find another one when they get to 130 students or whatever.
We'll be back.
Yeah.
We'll be back, so.
As
So
a
that-
co-op board member, I know we're so pressed for, same issue of, the parking lot that we have is so heavily used, and it goes to overcapacity so often, and yet keeping community members out from using it during the business hours.
Yeah.
I know my parking lot gets used for lots of stuff as well, so. Yours is the worst, though.
Oh, it's
I will agree, yours is the worst,
It's
because
terrible.
Oh, yeah.
getting in and out of yours is terrible just as it is, so
Yeah.
with a big car, I don't know how Dan Schoenberg does it with that truck.
No, I got
I ran a compact
four-door
car
with
into
an
the
8-foot
wall.
bed.
Do you
Yeah,
really?
we just.
You got a bigger one.
Yeah, we don't, come in there.
You know, since I drive a truck now, so my 16-year-old daughter will drive a truck. Yes, we are. She won't even
Hey,
drive.
Tim. So are you part of the university?